I'd like to then show you another engine over here where we've got a double overhead cam, and I can show you a great tool that we have to lock those double overhead cams down, and I can show you some tips on how to service an automatic tensioning drive.
Sounds great. Let's have a look.
Okay. And while I'm showing you that, I'd like to show you another kit that I have. You can even get it with the tool I just showed you how to tension the belt. We have, that goes in this master kit that has several different tools in it. You can see there's the rest of the adapters. You can see that it's got two of these tools in there, and this is a multi-lock tool. Remember the tool I just used to lock that one cam gear down? This is made for double overhead cams like this engine over here. And then I've got a gear wrench that I can use to turn those sprockets on the cam gear, a little more leverage. Sometimes they're kind of hard to move.
I'll get out of your way here.
Right. Get to work. Let me move to this side. Okay, Mark, here's this engine I was telling you about, the double overhead cams. And this is the type of engine that can be a real pain when you're trying to do a timing belt service on it, because it has 4 valves per cylinder, and it has a lot of spring pressure on these cams. Now, I don't want these cams to move while I'm doing my service, because I'll spend a lot of time trying to get them lined back up, and I also might damage my valves while I'm doing it. So I want to make sure I can lock these cams down before I start. This is the multi-lock tool, and it's got a lot of different adjustments on it, and it'll fit a wide variety of these cams. Let me go ahead and spend just a little bit of time here getting this lined up and lock my cams down. There. Now these cams aren't going anywhere. There. Now I like this tool because it does have a lot of different adjustments on it, and it will fit even the kind of cams that the cam gears that may have a ledge on them. It's got a piece made in there, so it'll go around that, and it'll fit these that are nice and tight like this one here.
What if the cams were farther apart?
And that happens. I do get some cams that are much further apart on a head. What I can do is this kit also comes with a spacer, actually 2 different spacers, so that if that cam was a lot further apart, I could space those out a lot further. And of course, an engine might be a V6 or a V8 that might have 2 sets of these. The kit comes with 2 of these multi-lock tools that'll hold that together. Now you'll see some cheaper imitations out there, but they're very risky because, one, they grab the teeth in a certain way. They don't have the right profile on them. They can damage the teeth, or they can get in the way of your belt when you're trying to take it on and off, so that they're not grabbing in this area here, but they're grabbing on further out in different areas, and it'll interfere with your belt job. Plus, I've seen them where you actually start tightening them up, and they'll actually fall off the drive, or they'll bend, and then your cams will actually spring together or spring away from each other. And there again, you can cause bad damage that way. Now you notice this engine is a little bit different with its tensioning device. It has a hydraulic ram, and you'll see an awful lot of the drives out there now that have a hydraulic ram like this. And it actually provides constant tension on the belt throughout its life. You don't have to go back in or readjust it, and you don't have to worry about adjusting it yourself. The thing is, sometimes they need replaced, and every time when you're servicing them, you're going to have to take them off. So let's just go ahead and see what that looks like if I take this off. Basically just 2 bolts that are holding it. Okay, now you can see I released the tension on the belt. This is all loose now, and my cams aren't going anywhere. But you'll see there's a plunger here. In order to service this, I have to push this plunger back into the hydraulic ram and retain it with a pin or a drill bit or an Allen wrench so I can reinstall it on the vehicle and then pull it out and apply the tension to the belt. Well, up until now, about the only thing you could use was drill bits or Allen head wrenches, and they're dangerous because they can snap, they're brittle, or you'll bend them, and at the very least they're ruined. But I've got a new tool here that's a pin set. And this pin set has 6 different sizes, works on a variety of different hydraulic rams. And I can show you how it works. We'll walk over here to the vise.
Great. Let's have a look.
Okay, Mark, so we've got a vise here that I want to compress this hydraulic tensioner in. And after I compress it, I'm going to put a pin in it to retain it in that position so we can reinstall it. Now, I'm just going to put this in here and make sure my grooves are already lined up so that I know that when I put the pin in, it's going to line up with the mark here and the holes out here. So I'll go ahead and put it in and start tightening it down. Now, you have to go very slow when you compress this because the hydraulic rams don't have a whole lot of room to vent the liquid, so it passes through a very small hole and you have to move it very slowly. It won't be forced very quick. So I'll just start compressing.
Go ahead and lean on it.
Okay, we're almost lined up. That's pretty good. Now this is where I'm going to put the pin in. Remember, you don't want to use an Allen head wrench or a drill bit because they're brittle and they'll break or they'll bend and could cause you an injury. So you want to use this pin set. You line it up in the hole and put it through so it lines up through all sides. And then I can release it. You can see it's holding it pretty well. And now I just take it back over to the engine and we'll put it on. So as you can see, Mark, that's a pretty handy little pin set to compress these hydraulic rams.
It certainly is.
So I'll go ahead and put it back on. This would also be an excellent time to replace this hydraulic ram if you had one available. They do wear out over time, and again, it's a component of the drive system, and if it can be replaced, it's always wise to replace that component. Okay, now the tensioner's on, all I have to do is pull the pin out. Now we're back up to tension, and it's going to keep tension on it automatically throughout its life cycle.
Great.
Now, again, I mentioned maybe replacing these. One thing that I've seen is that you'll see a little bit of leakage on the seal right here, on the inside of the tensioner. But you have to remember there's 2 sides of that seal. There's a side that's on the inside that's being lubricated by the fluid inside, and there's a seal portion on the outside that gets dry and brittle over time. Now, sometimes if you have a breakage where the belt breaks and the hydraulic ram snaps out right away, what you'll get is it will actually bring air back into that seal and fill air in this area here. So if you have one that breaks especially, it would be an excellent time to replace that. I wouldn't trust it to go another cycle.
That's a great tip.
Thanks for listening to these timing system tips from Gates. Remember, when it comes to timing systems, complete system service is the key. Use the knowledge you've gained today to keep your customers' vehicles on the road and performing well.
I want to show you those examples of what can happen if you don't tension the belt properly. Here's a belt I'd like to show you, and it's interesting because it's a double-sided timing belt. Now, if you look at this side, it looks normal. Everything looks fine. There's no marks on any of the teeth, no marks on any of the lands. But this belt was over-tensioned on the other side. If I flip it over, now you can see the kind of damage that I'm talking about. This actually damaged the land areas of the belt until it damaged it enough that it started ripping teeth out of it. That's a terrible thing to happen because once the teeth are gone, you can't keep proper time on the engine anymore. Catastrophic.
Synchronization that you were talking about.
Exactly. And you break down. Another belt that I have that's interesting is this one. And what happened with this one is it was over-tensioned and it was able to walk off the drive. Now, also a worn component could cause something like this to walk off the drive. What happens is once the belt starts to move, it rubs into the back of the engine or on the timing covers and rubs on the edge of the belt. You see where that's been rubbing? This belt used to be about as wide as this one. but it eventually wore down so thin that it wasn't able to operate anymore, and it just broke. On every one of our belts, we print a little statement that says, do not bend smaller than the tightest pulley, the smallest pulley on the engine.
Essentially, don't kink the belt.
Don't kink the belt. This is what happened to this one. It got kinked. And by kinked, I mean somebody bent it too small. Well, have you ever taken a piece of plastic or a piece of metal and bent it and rebent it over and over until it finally snaps? That's what happens to the belts, because the fabric inside of them actually can break. And every time it goes around a bend like this on the drive, it's bending this way, and eventually, so many times a minute, it's going to end up breaking. Now look how evenly that one broke.
Looks like it was cut by a knife.
It does look like it was cut by a knife, but it wasn't. It was actually kinked apart and broke. Another failure on the road. Now here's a belt that was tensioned properly. There's no damage from under tension or over tension, but it still broke. What happened to this one is if you smell it, you can see that it smells like coolant.
It does.
And what happened was that the water pump was leaking on this belt. The glycol contaminated the belt, soaked into the cords, and eventually caused it to break. So there's another component of the drive you don't want to forget about. That's the water pump. It's also critical to timing belt maintenance. While we're talking about contamination, there's one here that was contaminated by engine oil. Remember I said it was a good idea to replace those seals? If you don't, that's what will happen. You'll get a situation where the oil will soak into the belt, and it gets it very dirty, it makes it very weak, breaks down the rubber, and the belt doesn't stand a chance. It falls apart. One more I'll show you. This is a belt that's been damaged on every single tooth. It's kind of a strange setup.
All the way around.
When I first saw it, I was kind of puzzled. But after further investigation, what I learned what happened was that there was a water pump on the drive. But the water pump fit that engine for several different years. Somewhere along the line of the years, they changed the design of the pulleys and the belt, and they went to a square tooth instead of a round tooth. If you look at this belt, you can see that the teeth are round. Yeah. Well, if you look at this belt, you can see that they're spaced exactly the same, but they're square. That's what happened to this one. They changed the water pump with the wrong year style water pump, and it ended up damaging every single tooth on that belt as it went around. And eventually, you can see it started losing teeth. Sheared them off, that's right. So it's very critical to use the proper components, the proper year, start with a good catalog to look up your parts.
Those are some great tips, John.